In today's video, we're going to take a look at how I managed to complete the TransGranCanaria Classic with an injury in the heat and having not done any significant training. I'm so glad this isn't a DNF video. Prior to this visit, we'd been to Gran Canaria twice before with this lot on holiday, and I'd done the TransGranCanaria Ultra twice before, finishing in around 26 hours the previous times. Gran Canaria is really accessible from the UK, beautiful weather, lots to do for children and family, so it's a really lovely place to come. And if you want to stick in a run, the TransGranCanaria Classic is part of the World Trail Majors series, so it's really quite a prestigious event. Both previous times that I've done this race, I'd been hoping to get under 24 hours. The first time I was basically just surprised about how tough it was, and it was really hot, and I think I did 26 hours something. And the second year we had an unbelievable storm and it was freezing cold, pouring with rain, loads of people DNF'd, and I did again around about 26, 27 hours that time. So I knew this was a tough race. The other slight problem about TransGranCanaria is it comes right at the time when most of us are doing our marathon training. And I've been training for Manchester Marathon this year. And so sticking an ultra distance race right in the middle of that is probably not the best idea. So we come into the TransGranCanaria Classic 2025 in the middle of marathon training, it not being an A race, and then we managed to get injured. Now, as I always say, you cannot do long distance ultra training and also train for short distance fast running at the same time, i.e. the Manchester Marathon is going to be short and fast, 3 hours and under hopefully. TransGranCanaria Classic is going to be 24 to 30 hours. You can't train for both of those races at the same time. And Manchester Marathon really does have to be my focus. So Manchester is my A race. TransGranCanaria was kind of just stuck in the middle there. And then, as many of you will know if you've seen my previous video, I managed to injure my Achilles, which meant for the past 4 weeks or so, I really haven't been able to train. But I was absolutely determined to try and make it to this race. And with a gradual improvement of my Achilles injury, I decided I would try and make the start line. Now, some of you might suggest I made an interesting shoe choice for the TransGranCanaria Classic. Normally, on a race like this, you would obviously wear trail shoes, wouldn't you? But do you know what? I absolutely love my Hoka Skyward X. And despite the fact that they don't have any grip at all, no lugs, they are essentially road shoes, I decided that because of the comfort of the shoe and because the trails were mostly going to be pretty dry, I could get away with wearing my Skyward X. I made it to the start line wearing my Flying Burrito yellow shirt, my trusty Salomon backpack, and my HG shorts, which I bought at the expo literally the day before. I'd managed to have a really restful day, but that didn't stop me being uber nervous, and I had no idea whether my Achilles would hold out for the full race. There's over 6,000 meters of elevation gain in the race, and the first 7 hours are all in the dark from midnight until the sun eventually rises at around 7:30 in the morning. I think I managed to complete about 40k, maybe just about a marathon before the sun came up, and my ankle was holding out very well. Bearing in mind the elite athletes, the ones at the sharp end, were already well over halfway through the race. Everything was going particularly well. My foot was aching, but it wasn't sore. It certainly wasn't painful. I was eating well. I had no stomach problems. The temperature was fine early morning. The sun was just rising. Everything was looking good. And that's pretty much how things continued for the next 20k or so. Climbing, descending, absolutely beautiful views. Seriously, this race is so gorgeous, and when the weather is fine, because it wasn't in 2022, but when the weather is fine, the views across the island are absolutely stunning. Now, I knew that I was never going to make 24 hours, the kind of goal that I'd always kind of set myself for this race. It was always a case of making sure I just got to the end within the cutoffs, and up until around 60k that had been fine. But then at around halfway through the race, my foot really did start to hurt more and more. It was aching, I was having difficulty on the descents. Funnily enough, climbing actually wasn't too bad, and on the flat was fine, but coming downhill started to hurt quite a lot. There's this absolutely beautiful section where you run from Artanara aid station to Tejeda aid station along a ridge with the valley down below. It's absolutely stunning. And I managed to do that, but then the descent into Tejeda was absolutely excruciating, and I slowed down so much my feet just couldn't hold me up. And one problem with wearing the Skyward X shoes with no grip on the bottom was that the descent into Tejeda was so steep that it really didn't grip, and I was slipping and my foot was hurting, and it took me forever to get down to that aid station. I finally made it to Tejeda aid station with 6 minutes to spare before cutoff. Ben Parks met me there, asked me if I needed anything, which was very kind of him. He'd been waiting for Sarah. Sarah was an hour ahead of me. But this is where things suddenly started to change. On leaving the aid station, I got a phone call from Victoria, and she said, according to the tracker, you are going to miss the next cutoff by half an hour. Half an hour? I mean, I'd been tight to cutoffs, but I didn't think I was that far behind. And I got really worried, and I decided if I'm not going to make it to the next aid station, because it was a big climb up to the next checkpoint, I thought I may as well just quit. So I was on the phone to Victoria. What did you tell me?
If your foot is genuinely hurting you that much and you are not going to make the cutoffs, then I really think you should stop.
So at this point, I really was considering calling it a day at around 80k into the race.
And I am the first person to tell Stephen to keep carrying on in a race. You know, dig deep, give it your best. But if you're genuinely injured, I see no point in carrying on.
So that was where we were at. Now, very kindly, Ben had offered that if my foot gave way and if I was really injured, that he would give me a lift back to the hotel. And so I gave Ben a ring. And I put him in an impossible position. I basically said, Ben, do you think I should carry on or should I quit? And he said, I can't answer that, which is exactly the right thing. He said, I can't make that decision for you. But, he said, if there is any chance that you can make it to the next aid station, you may as well try. Why not try? So that's what we did. I said, okay, I'll see if I can get to the next aid station. Ben was going to be there anyway. If I didn't make it within the cutoff, he was there to help me out. Essentially what it was me asking Ben to pick me up and to give me an excuse to quit the race. And he wouldn't let me do that. If you are not yet subscribed to the Film My Run YouTube channel, please click that button down below and subscribe now. It is completely free. It really helps us out. It really helps us to create more content and bring these kind of stunning races in these beautiful locations to you. And if you'd like to support the channel even further, then you can become a member from as little as £1 a month. Just click the link down below and that will send you to the page where you can join as a member of the Film My Run YouTube channel. So on I went up the most arduous climb, the longest climb of the race. About 1,000 meters to get up to the highest point of the race at the Garanon aid station. And by now the light was fading, and as I got up that hill I had to put my head torch on. It was a long, slow grind. To add to the issues, there was some confusion about what the cut-off times were for Garanon. I thought it was 8 p.m, but Victoria said it was 8:15, so I didn't actually know how long I had to get to the top of the hill. So I just carried on, one foot in front of the other. Eventually, you'll get to your destination. And do you know what? I made it. But I made it at 1 minute past 8, and I thought I was done. I thought I was out. I got to the checkpoint and I said to the guy at the checkpoint, "Am I out? Is that it?" He went, No, you're fine. Cutoff is until 8:15. Part of me died a little bit when he told me I could carry on, that I hadn't missed the cutoff. Ben was there. Ben said, "Come on, keep going. You've got this." So, reluctantly, I had to say goodbye to the thought of bed and sleep, and I carried on. I've now got just under a marathon to go. It's dark. Surprisingly, the heat of the day hadn't been that bad. It was warm, about 25 degrees, but actually on the tops of the hills, there was a lovely cooling breeze, and it was nothing like as hot as that Swiss Alps race that I DNF'd earlier last year. And weirdly, my foot actually wasn't so sore anymore. I think it's a psychological thing, isn't it? Once I'd decided that I was carrying on, once the option of quitting had been taken away and I had to carry on, my foot started to feel better and I was able to run. Bear in mind though, I was still really close to cutoffs. Now, of course, regardless of whether I was injured or not, this is a really long race with a ridiculous amount of elevation, and it's really technical. By now, 100k in, I was really tired, and the journey to the second last aid station at Tunte was so arduous. It was on and on in the dark on this little windy trail. I was running in a little train of people, all with our head torches on, all focused on not falling over, not tripping on the rocks, on this little single track windy trail down to Tunte aid station. I finally made it to Tunte aid station with about 10 minutes to spare before cutoff. Ben met me there and unfortunately delivered the bad news that I was expected to arrive at the final aid station 1 minute after cutoff. Basically, get a move on. I marched as hard as I could up the hill out of Tunte aid station and then ran as much as I could run at that stage of the race to the final aid station at Agueres, 14 kilometres from home. The choice to wear the Skyward X shoes is arguable. Yes, they caused me to slip a little bit on that steep descent down into Tejeda, but I think along with the fantastic Enator insoles that I've been wearing for years now, they prevented my ankle from swelling up too much and they saved my quads. I was well over 100k into the race before I really started to feel that my quads were trashed. The 12 kilometres between Tunte and the final aid station at Agueres was just a case of getting your head down and slowly ticking off those miles. Cut-off time at Agueres was 2:25 a.m. I could see the lights in the distance at about 2 a.m. and it took me probably another 10-15 minutes to get there. Made it to Agueres before the cut-off with just, again, a few minutes to spare. Finally, I could relax just a little bit. Cut-off time for the entire race was 30 hours. That was 6 a.m. and I had about 3.5 hours to do the final 14 kilometres. Those final 14 kilometres are some of the most well-known and arduous kilometres of the whole run, along a dry riverbed after a 300-metre climb and a technical descent, along a dry riverbed all the way to the finish. According to my wife, when I left Agueres aid station, there were only 3 runners behind me in the race. I was determined not to finish last. So I ran as hard as my little legs, trashed as they were, would carry me along that dry riverbed. When I left the final checkpoint, there were 3 people behind me, so Victoria says from the tracker. I managed to catch 20 other people before I crossed the finish line in Maspalomas. Sometimes in a race, things just don't go your way and there's very little you can do about it. But other times, just a truism from somebody like Ben telling me to try a bit harder, or a bit of fortune like the cut-off time being 8:15 instead of 8 o'clock, can propel you forward, can give you that little bit of something to get you to the end. And that's what happened in this race. I crossed the finish line of the TransGranCanaria Classic just over an hour before the 30-hour cut-off. I can't tell you how ridiculously pleased I am with myself for having completed that race. And hopefully it gives you a little bit of inspiration too, that it's mental fortitude, you know, it's the strength to just carry on when everything wants you to quit. Your whole body wants you to quit, your head wants you to quit, and you manage to force yourself to the end. That's what I'm really pleased about this race, that I got to the end despite everything. Of course, I can't do these races completely on my own. There's always a support team around me. My wife, of course, constantly there supporting me, sending me text messages saying, one foot in front of the other, keep going, you can do it. Ben for being there at the aid stations and for giving me that piece of advice just to say, look, keep trying. If there's a chance that you can make it to the next aid station, then do so. So I'm really pleased that he was there, and thank you to him for helping me through the race. And of course, a massive thank you to the sponsors of this video. The shirt I wore during the race was the yellow Flying Burrito shirt. If you want a Flying Burrito shirt so that you can look better than anyone else at whatever race you do, then go to the description. You'll find a link in the description with some money off, so you can get yourself a Flying Burrito shirt. Thank you too to Enator. Without these Enator insoles in my Skyward X, my legs would not have survived as well as they did. So thank you to Enator for supplying me with these insoles. And finally, thank you to Protein Rebel for supplying me with these energy gels, which I used during the race. I don't really sit well with gels, but these ones are very simple. They're just maple syrup and a bit of sea salt. Very straightforward. This one, the coffee one, has a little bit of caffeine and coffee in as well. So I really enjoyed taking these during the race. Thank you so much to Protein Rebel for supplying them. And that is it. Thank you very much for watching this deep dive into my TransGranCanaria race. I'm so pleased to have finished it for the third time. I might be done with this race now and we'll go and do something else next year. Take care. See you on the start line next time. Bye bye.